I've been working with glass since 1970. Just about my whole adult life has been involved in glass. It's the first time I ever put a blowpipe into glass. It was just absolutely magical. Material is so immediate, so unforgiving, and just absolutely fascinating. So that's what brought me to the glass.
To say that Chris Buzzini's glasswork is small is an understatement. An entire handmade floral arrangement measures 2 inches wide. And every time he finishes this minuscule, detailed work, he then deliberately risks destroying it all.
It actually kind of tightens the heart muscle a little bit, I think. You know, it's like, oh no, not another one, you know. It's extremely nerve-wracking, and you know, it's just like if you worked all week long and the boss says on Friday, well, I'm sorry, we're not going to pay you today, you know, because we've had a little problem. Well, this is what I come up with quite often.
Ultimately, his tiny glass flowers need to be encased in glass. To do it, he must drop molten crystal over his tiny strands.
The temperature's at 832, and the key to a good result is the proper temperature of everything. So I'm waiting for that to drop down to 812.
Chris practices a little-known art in the field of glass. He makes Lampwork Paperweights. The craft dates back 150 years.
They're really not used for paperweights. They're a collectible item. People that collect these, some people have hundreds of them in cabinets such as the one behind me. It's kind of a secret within the art world. The work is not normally found in major galleries. A lot of people think it's something made out of resin or plastic. When people ask me how long it takes to make these, I normally tell them, you know, 3 or 4 days and 30 years experience, because it's really the experience that makes the difference.
In Chris's crystal paperweights, the detail is in the detail. Just when you spot a tiny feature, like a flower, you realize he's inserted yet something smaller, even deeper. A single thistle blossom, for instance, can contain 1,000 glass fibers.
I really like the small detail, and one thing I like about my work is you can look at it and come back to it, you know, later and look, and then you'll see stuff that you didn't see the first time. It's very, very difficult to do something that small and that delicate and that precise in such a small space.
Chris specializes in flowers, miniaturized leaves, petals, stamens, and stems. Today, he's making a flower that grows behind his Oregon City studio.
This is kind of my take on a chicory flower. So then I just take the colored glass, and on the clear, then I make 4 little swipes. Fuse those in. And just carefully pull the little tip. This will be the back end. This is the end that will go into the flower, and then the little black fiber comes out of the tip. Okay, so that's all the pods I need. So I work from underneath the flame so I can see the heat when they start fusing together. And then there's a lot of placement and adjustment as you go along as well, because you can't always put them exactly in the spot that you want them. And once they're on there, they're hard to get off, so you really have to be fairly accurate to begin with. And what I'm doing when I look down the rod here is I'm looking at the flower from the front, and that kind of gives me a good determination of how it's looking.
The highest compliment, he says, is when someone mistakes his tiny glass flowers for real ones.
Ultimately, what I want is I want the flowers to be recognizable, first of all, as flowers, but if they can be more specific than that, then that pleases me. When I look at nature, whenever I look at flowers now, that's all I think about is how would I do that in glass. And that's the first thing I think about. I wait every year for my apple blossoms. Apple blossoms I just think are just absolutely incredible. Right out the shop there I have 2 apple trees, and so the natural study is there. That's all I do is I make flowers in here and I tend flowers out there. So that's my role in life.
He sells most of his work, but saved one to fill a hole in a step in his garden.
And that's a Western Columbine, and I actually have one planted back there. And I took one of the blossoms last year and put it next to it. It's darn near identical.
It takes time to sink in for some people. that the flowers inside the glass really are glass.
The general reaction is how do you keep the real flowers inside the glass? And what people don't understand is if you're taking a material that's 1950 degrees and pouring it over organic material, it will just literally burn up eventually.
Sometimes even his flowers fail to hold up to the heat. It is now time to pour the crystal and put days of work in jeopardy.
Bubbles can occur. You can trap large bubbles on top of the flowers. A flower can break or crack or break apart. So if anything's going to happen, it's going to generally be in that split second. Alrighty, here we go. There's the crystal. I lift that up, drop it right on top of the flower and hit the vacuum switch. Just let it kind of solidify a little bit right there. So I always call it the blink of an eye, that, you know, everything is gained. Now you can see the flower's been impregnated into the top of the glass. It looks like a pretty darn good result. I can see enough in there, and you can see the back side of the flowers is very flat, which is important. Sometimes I've spent as much as a week's worth of effort. It's all inside of here, and if you mess that up, then you just kind of turn everything off, go outside, take a breather, but then you got to come back in and start again because you're a week behind already because of that. It's not just a matter of heating this up and smoothing it out so I don't trap any bubbles on the back side of the flower.
We watched him pour the molten crystal twice, and each time it came out fine. But even as a 30-year veteran, he says he still loses about 5% of his creations.
Here's the final product.
Chris thinks he knows why this type of glasswork is not well known. The name paperweight often conjures images of a plastic globe filled with floating snow.
Even the gallery owners of mainstream galleries, I don't think, appreciate the effort and the expertise involved in the work that I do. And again, it gets back to the name paperweight. I think that people just need to get beyond the name and really look at what's inside. And it's a very small market. Anybody who's involved in paperweights, what they always say is that it's an unrecognized art field. My fear is that there will be a day where these won't be made anymore. Now, there's only about 20 people worldwide that do the kind of work that I do.
Still, he's made a successful career. His paperweights often sell within days to high-end collectors around the world.
35 years later, here I am in my private little studio and producing some of the finest, Lampwork paperweights in the world. A gallery will say, well, there's no form to this artwork. Well, the form's on the inside. It's a form contained in a simple sphere, but it's the form inside that matters.